Welcome to Main Street Minds with your host, Amish Munshi. This is where industry leaders and seasoned pros share their secrets to success beyond limits. Let's dive in.
Hello and welcome to Main Street Minds. Today we have a very special guest, Bryan, here with us all the way from San Antonio, Texas. He is specializing in bringing modern, latest technology innovations and helping the defense industry. He's working with SBIR advisors right now and has a wealth of knowledge to share with us. So without any further delay, let's welcome Bryan. Bryan, the floor is yours. Please enlighten us with what you do and share your rich experience with us.
Sure, Amish, I appreciate you having me on today. Yeah, I've had an interesting journey. I got into technology in the late 90s. My dad had always had computers growing up. He actually ran private production in the oil field, so producing heavy crude. And so they were a small producer, had wells in South Texas. And back in the 80s, he had a Commodore 64, was using it to create spreadsheets and track production and do different things that most small producers weren't. And he very much always leaned forward into technology. And so we always had computers around, and he allowed me to, use them and learn. And so in the late 90s, I started doing, computer repair, basic, loading up, old versions of Windows 98 and things like that. And I got an internship with a guy I had known through high school, working with him, starting to do IT repair, computer repair for small businesses here in San Antonio. I took a short stint from that and actually went and worked for an internet service provider that some of the listeners may remember, Earthlink, and they had an operation down here in San Antonio where they were managing about 500 BlackBerry enterprise servers and then tens of thousands of associated devices for their customers. And so actually ended up running that tier 2 help desk. And in 2003, with more and more folks using BlackBerries, the nature of BlackBerries at the time, especially the BlackBerry enterprise servers, they were a lot to maintain. They frequently would break and you had to troubleshoot them and get them back up. And I said, boy, there sure seems to be an opportunity here. And so I actually started a company, actually acquired that company that I had been working with as an intern, acquired that company and started doing BlackBerry consulting. Like that was the core business that I started to do in 2003. And through about 2007, that was a pretty good business until, the iPhone came out, right? And then nobody wanted to use BlackBerries anymore. But we had already started transitioning our business model because everything was attached to mail servers, right? And Exchange was still the predominant mail server at the time, especially for smaller businesses, doctors' offices, hospitals, that kind of thing. And so we had already gone down the path of starting to partner closely with Microsoft. And by 2007, we were certified gold Microsoft partners. We had really committed to that ecosystem and partnership with them. And really then over the next, 8 years or so, we heavily invested in the Microsoft relationship. We got included in the Azure Insider Circle back in 2008 before Azure was actually GA. We started doing a lot of, at the time, BPOS, before Office 365 existed, migrations to business productivity online services mostly for email, SharePoint. Had a whole team of developers that were doing SharePoint development, custom .NET apps, SQL apps, and built one that was pretty impressive. Actually got picked up by the San Antonio Business Journal back after we had built it. There was actually a system by which small EMS carriers, which most of them, especially when you go to rural areas, are all volunteers. They needed to get their billing completed so that they could get reimbursed by the insurance companies, Medicaid, Medicare, whatever it might be. So we actually built an electronic system that allowed them to scan in all of their run receipts from the different trips they would take people on and submit them to the company in order to process all of the billing. And so it was actually all done in an automated system. And we saw some great productivity gains from that. And it was a lot of fun to be part of that project and actually see the impact that it was driving for those volunteer fire department, EMS and fire departments. And so I ran that company like I said, till 2016, and then the market had kind of started to shift. I'd been doing managed IT services a long time. I was candidly kind of a little burned out on it.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, managed IT is great. It's definitely nice because it's, monthly recurring revenue, and it definitely helps when you go to sell the business. But the reality is, as much cool project stuff as we got to do, the core business was still, hey, I can't log in, please
Yeah.
help me. And so you're really almost running like an ER for IT, right?
Yeah.
And it can be very challenging at times. So I ended up deciding to merge with another company. And then after about a year, decided to go ahead and exit that space. Wanted to try something new. I got, after I sold the company in 2017, I started consulting with some other really more traditional IT companies and value added resellers who saw that they needed to do managed services, like that was the future of it. Or even some managed services companies who had not yet really figured out how to wrap managed IT services around these cloud services, right? Because it used to be I would charge you, for your servers, but then the
Yeah.
second those are all cloud hosted
Yeah.
systems, like that same model doesn't work anymore. And we had solved that at my company and with my partners. So I started consulting with some companies, and through doing that, I actually ended up working with a company here in San Antonio, Denim Group. They were a boutique cybersecurity company, very well known, worked with Fortune 5 companies doing mostly application security. So a lot of threat modeling, penetration testing, building AppSec programs, building scanning pipelines to evaluate code before it's released to production, really adopting that kind of DevSecOps mentality. And they had a product that they had built that was able to cross-correlate vulnerability data, specifically static and dynamic scan results. And so, when you scan your code and you scan the environment, there's going to be vulnerabilities both tools identify, but one fix is going to resolve that in both sets, right? And so reducing the noise to the developers was like a big, creating that full feedback loop, reducing noise was really what that tool did. And it was actually being used by the Air Force and some of the intel community, National Geospatial Intelligence Agency. And they were using it in some of their DevSecOps pipelines to automate their security approval process to be able to rapidly write code and release it in much faster time frames than historically they had been able to. We're talking like going from 6 months down to 2 weeks. So like significant increases in how fast they could push code. And I learned about a special program that existed called the Small Business Innovation Research Program. It was a program that actually has been around since the 80s. Basically, the DoD puts aside, the Department of Defense puts aside 3.2% of their budget every year. And small businesses, and that money gets allocated off to the side, and small businesses are eligible to apply for, and it depends on the agency. They can be grants, they can be contracts. The Air Force had done something different, though, where historically the agency, whichever one it was, would say, we would like small businesses who believe that they can build a prototype of XYZ type system or solution, whatever it was. And then companies would put together these strong teams and they would submit proposals, get selected, they would do the research. But the problem was that transitioned only about 1% of all the research that was done through the program. So it was a pretty low transition rate. Now we're talking, 3.2% DoD budget. Air Force is consuming half of it. It's about $1.5 billion a year of R&D money that's getting pumped into the small business ecosystem in the US. But only about 1% of those projects end up transitioning. So the Air Force had the idea of, instead of the Air Force putting out requirements that companies could build against, why not really focus on dual use commercial technology? So think I have commercial companies who have probably already built something. It may not be 100% to my specification or requirement, but it might be 80 or 90% there. And so I don't have to start from scratch. I can start with at least a baseline and then build upon that. So they created what was called an open topic. And so what that meant is that commercial companies could come to the Air Force and say, hey, I believe that I can solve a defense need that you have with my commercial technology by adapting it to meet your specific requirement. And they would get funded to do that. And so we started applying for these, and they actually award them as contracts. we started applying for these contracts. The Air Force does. We started applying for them in 2019. Actually, won my first one in 2019 with the Air Force F-35 Joint Program Office, where they were going to take that vulnerability tool, embed it into their pipelines. There were some adaptations and some tweaks and changes we need to make to some of the workflows to fit how they do product development alongside with Lockheed. And that was kind of my first foray into it, right? And I saw that there was, great potential, right, to be able to accelerate both the capabilities that the government has, but also bring in all of this good novel technology that's being created out in the commercial ecosystem. So I continued to do that over the past 5 years. I actually worked with our team here at SBIR Advisors. I was a client of theirs, actually since before our founder started the company in 2019. In 2020, I had worked with him prior to that. And I've been a client of theirs for the past 5 years or so, and had the opportunity to come over to the team last February to work with them. And I'd worked for a couple other companies, helped them go through this process. One of them was CloudBees, the enterprise company behind the open source project Jenkins. And we were doing the same thing, right? Like, how can we increase the speed at which government can develop and release code? And more specifically, how do we do that in a secure way to where they can get the right authorizations they need when that code comes up at the end of the pipeline, so that I can go and immediately deploy that? And so it gave me a lot of great insight into kind of that whole process and what the government was looking for. And so that's kind of where I got to where I'm at today, right? So a little bit of a journey. Started out, very technical. Ran a company where we were focused on more small business, state, local government entities, some Fed, and then now really just fully federally focused, right? And specifically within the Department of Defense.
Yeah.
Nowadays, what I'm really mostly focused on is kind of two-part, right? Is going out and identifying and finding companies who are creating novel technology. So, you went to CES this year. You just go around, talk to companies, understand what they're building, and to try to see if they're a good fit for some of the requirements that we get. I also work as a tech scout under some collaborative research and development agreements with the government, where I work on a weekly basis. They put out requirements of things that they have that are needs. And then as I'm out looking at different companies and technologies, I can say, hey, I found one that could satisfy that requirement. So most recently, they had one of our customers that we do that for. They had a requirement where they wanted to bring in some forward-leaning, marketing companies who can leverage AI to do, recruiting, right? And so going out and sourcing some companies to fit against those requirements was really part of that journey. And the whole goal here, right, is to really bring innovative technology to the warfighter, right? There's things that commercial technologies they can use today, and to leverage that Small Business Administration SBIR program to do that initial funding of it. And then from there, it gets kind of interesting because the initial kind of approach is it's a 3-phase program. So phase 1 is usually like a feasibility study, right? I think I can solve this need. This is what my technology does. And then you're going to put on contract to go and explore that, right? To go talk to government end users, program managers, have conversations and say, hey, if I were to build this solution or take my solution and adapt it in this way, is that actually solving the perceived problem that we believe that you have? And then if the answer is yes, then they move to phase 2, right? Now we're going to actually do some prototyping together. Those contracts tend to be a little larger, about 1.25 million up to 2 million. And they can range from 12 to 18 months. And you're actually working alongside government, getting the requirements, building against that, adapting your commercial technology to be able to be used by the government. And then there's a component where, that's good, right? But it can take the government time to get budget sometimes to procure these solutions on a sustaining basis, right? 18 to 24 months, maybe longer. And so how do you bridge that gap from I did my R&D project, we've actually got something they want, but it's going to take them 2 years to get money to buy it, right?
Yeah.
There's a cool program that the Air Force has, and now Army and Navy actually have them as well. Air Force started doing a program called TACFI StratFi. And basically what it allows you to do is these startups, these small businesses, are able to actually match venture capital raise against additional R&D funding on these contracts. Because the idea is if the commercialization of the product is strong and they're being VC backed and everything else, then that means that company has a high likelihood of sustaining, right? And that technology being around. And if the government's then able to use that technology, they're the benefits of all the commercial innovation that's happening, where they may not be driving that innovation, but they may consume it once it's built, right? And so it's a really cool program that allows them to kind of bridge that valley of death, right? So I come out of my R&D project. It's going to take them some time to get sustainment funding, and so how do I bridge that gap in between? And then any company that participates, once they've won a phase 1 or phase 2 contract, they're actually get rights for sole source, which means the government can buy them without additional competition because they've already been through a competition and they've already been funded by the government. So government has preference to use those technologies that's funded first before they go and buy or ask someone to build that thing again, right? And so it really starts to create an interesting go-to-market path within the government for these companies where they can start to transact faster. The other thing that's interesting is, startups need revenue now, right? Not 24 months from now. And so the way that these programs are designed is to be very rapid funding mechanisms. So I submit a proposal to the government. 30 days later, I get an award notice, yes or no. And 30 days later, I'm on contract. And that timeline can shift a little here and there, but roughly from the time I submit and that window closes, 60 to 90 days later, I'm going to know and be on contract if I won. And when you think of government procurement, that's very rapid, right? Usually it would take 6 months, or again, depending if they even have budget, it could take up to 6 months or 2 years to get the money. So it just creates a novel way to pull these different companies that are building really great technology in, adapt it for the specific requirement the government has, and bring those two worlds together. And it's cool because there's no past performance required, right? And so a company could never have done any business with the government, and this is their entry point into doing that. And for some of these technology companies, like that can be significant, right? Like these funds can really help them drive. You get $1.25 million to accelerate your roadmap. Like that can be a significant investment in your company. It's all non-dilutive funding, so government doesn't take any equity, so they're not having to give up equity. But it's really a great way to bolster that startup ecosystem. And so that's what I ended up doing and do today is really live in that world of finding really cool companies who have novel technology that we can bring that innovation to the warfighters fast as possible to help them with their mission set.
Yeah, that's amazing. So like over there, like it's a great journey, but and you did mention about like how you overcome and like figured out the places where things used to fail, and like it's just amazing that we can actually have solutions for those issues now. But like on the flip side, like what are some of the challenges that you still see? Like what are some of the gaps that you would think you wish I wish this was fixed, and what are some of the places where you see more innovation or process improvements that we can still do?
Yeah, so I mean, I think there's one big area, right? And this is just a challenge because of the nature of what it is. But when any system that runs on within a government network, enclave, whatever you want to call it, right? Depends if it's a physical system, software. Let's just use software as the example, right? I'm going to run my software in the AWS Gov Cloud, but I need to get accredited to run there. And so there's this accreditation pathway I have to go to. You may have heard of things like FedRAMP. FedRAMP can cost companies a pretty large amount of money, $1 million, and take 2 years, right? That's not always the case, but certainly can be. So those can be very costly processes, but the government can't use and consume the software if it's not able to run on their network, right? Yeah. And so one big area is, being able to provide almost some accredited environment specifically for these companies that are coming through this SBIR program, to where they have an ability to come out the other end of that project with an accreditation that can be used. That becomes one area where I think you see some issue with tech adoption. I think when you think of where the future and kind of promise lies, is it still really is around AI, right? There's been a lot of talk about AI and programs evaluating AI technology, but like actually implementing it for real mission impact, I think still lends itself to creating a big opportunity. I think when we look in other areas, like electronic warfare, when we look at the conflict in Ukraine and a lot of what we've seen there, now we're starting to look for solutions that can operate and run in GPS denied environments, right? Or things of that nature. And so when you move outside of just software as itself, I think there starts to become some interesting pathways and opportunities there. I think it'll just be a matter of continuing to kind of stay the course and help bring as much novel technology as we can to the table. But those would be a couple areas, right? Getting a better accreditation path, and there's some efforts going on, and there's actually some third parties, commercial companies that provide pathways for those accreditations. But you have to pay for them, right? And so there ends up being a cost involved in it, but being able to get the technology adopted and actually running on a user's phone or on their laptop, like that still becomes the hurdle that you got to get over, right?
Yeah, makes sense. Yeah, so there were like, actually this is great because I'm thinking of a couple of new innovative things that were coming up. I was interviewing someone, and there is someone over here in California who wants to develop like completely self-driving places, the vehicle that can just self-drive by itself. But the goal was not like kind of replacing the driver or something. It was like to make the roads safer, right? And make them more efficient. It should be possible for a machine to be able to drive at 100 miles an hour, while if we are not able to trust a human being to do that. So, but he obviously wanted like to make that possible, it needed a lot of environmental change. But I can think of a military application where it may be possible, like where there is no other people if it's in a like if it's in like a remote place or something that's slightly different. And so yeah, I'll try and connect both of you and see if there is some synergies and of something that may be of value. If nothing else, it's just one more person,
Yeah, that'd be great. Yeah, it's interesting you talk about that. Like the autonomy space is interesting, right? Because when you look at self-driving cars, as an example, and like Waymo, right? I've been able to use Waymo now a couple times. First, I used it in San Francisco when I was out there in the fall, but then now Austin, Texas has them, and I was up there the other day and used one. And when I was actually out at CES in January, I went around and looked at a lot of the autonomy related capabilities like cars and vehicles, and just to kind of see where's that technology at. Yeah. And there was a couple takeaways I got. Like the technology has actually advanced a lot from the perspective of the sensors, the radars, and their power consumption. They've really been able to fine tune those systems to be much more accurate and draw a lot less power, which in the EV space, right, that's going to be important. I can't have my sensors draining my battery, right? I still need to be able to get to where I'm going. And just their overall ability to do things like sense, examples was one company had developed a sensor that was able to detect a pallet laying flat on the middle of the road at 500 meters, right? Which is a pretty in fog, like 60% visibility. So it was certainly sensing via radar, not visual detection, that this object was there. I think what you're still going to have to get over with some of that is the training of the AI models, right? Where I can train you on a lot of environments, but what happens if one day you go out there and all of a sudden there are cones that are there for construction purposes because there was a water main that busted and now traffic has to go around that? Can it understand what to do? And so there was actually an interesting discussion as part of that talked about actually the need for it to also be aware of what other vehicles are doing and almost kind of follow the leader type approach, right? Like if it gets into those scenarios where all of a sudden the lanes don't match, the striping's gone because it's under construction, it needs to have some ability to adjust itself and just follow the path of what the other vehicles are doing. And that technology is like advancing at rapid paces. So that's a very interesting space. And I think there's certainly a lot of military application for that when you think of
Yeah.
unmanned vehicles. When you think of UAS, UAVs, look at
Yeah.
drones and everything, and being able to operate in both connected and disconnected environments, I think starts to become a really interesting use case.
Yeah, yeah, and I think like even a semi-connected, right, where it's taking decisions, but at least if it's able to give some feedback, and let's say the communication is there is a delay in the communication, but before it goes and just completely goes down in a wrong direction, if there's
Right.
somebody who can like say in a minute or two like respond back saying, "Hey, I think you're on the wrong track, go back."
Right.
Semi-connected.
Yeah, it's the whole conversation around human in, on, or out of the loop, right? And like, what's the appropriate amount of human interaction with those systems? Are they completely out but have the ability to override, or are they actually engaged and they have some role to play? AI can make a decision to a certain point. Now I come in and I validate or give my feedback, then it makes that decision. But I think that space is going to continue just to advance at such a rapid pace, right? It's going to be hard to stay on top of in a way.
Yeah, absolutely. So coming back to your journey, I was looking at it, and did you also do more of investments and venture capital before as well?
I have done some angel investing. Most of the investment work that we do is through VCs we have partnerships with, where again, because there's that fund matching program,
Mhm.
being able to tie that piece together. Yeah, most of mine has been kind of light touch, early stage angel investing. And actually, funny enough, most of it has been sales tools. That was kind of an interest area for me. And I think there was some potential opportunities where technology was advancing that was going to make some pretty big impacts. You start to think of how do you accelerate outreach and reminders and follow up? And like certainly there were systems that did that, but I think now we look at the way AI can create content, follow up. It has some amount of context. That's always been kind of just an interest area to me, right? Like, I mean, ultimately, when you have a business, there's a sales component to it, right? And so I have always been in and around sales, and it just has been something that I've always had a great interest in. And so that actually is most of my personal investments has been in that space. And like I said, from a company perspective, we're looking at companies who are eligible when they're at these points where they're eligible for the fund matching programs, either us working with the venture capital to invest in them, get the matching funds from the government, and really help accelerate them to the next step.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. And in addition to kind of like, I think this is a very important role, right? Like being able to find the gaps and bridging the gaps in where the innovation is happening. Should it be in-house? Should it be procuring something that's somewhat ready? Like how where do you see the future? Like, do you see more innovation happening when with a top-down approach of like creating the requirements and like saying, okay, this is what we really want to do, and let's figure out a way to make it happen, versus seeing what is being innovated in the commercial space, and let's see if we can apply it for DoD. Like, where do you see more innovation happening that's more useful for you?
Yeah, so obviously, like you got to keep tabs on what is being discussed in the
Oh yeah,
House and
yeah.
Congress on the Hill. There's a lot of discussion right now about the need to tap more into the existing innovation ecosystem, right? And so I think we're going to continue to see a big push. There's actually some conversations going on right now. DoD puts aside 3.2% of their budget. There's talks in the reauthorization of the bill this year that they want to bump that up to 3.45% and raise minimum award values from 1.25 million to $2 million.
Mhm.
They also, though, really want to see transition, right? Transition is the key. Like, it's great to go fund research and development projects, but ultimately we need some percentage of those, and more than 1%, transitioning to actually being used in
Oh yeah,
production, right? And so I think that it's going to be a combination. And I think it depends on what the exact requirement is. There are
right.
some things, let's be honest, there's some things in the military world that just don't have commercial application, right?
Yeah,
There's no commercial company that is ever going to use that or buy that solution in
yeah,
any way, shape, or form. And so I think that it's going to be a blend. We need to build specific things, leveraging AI and other advancements
Mhm.
We need to build those things fit for military. And then
Mhm.
there's the other side of it, which is let's then go take as much of that commercial innovation as possible, bring it in, adjust
Mhm.
it to fit the requirement, and then we can now take advantage of it. So I think it's only going to increase. Air Force, Space Force have preference through this program for dual use technology. I will say when you go to Army and Navy, they're the ones often asking for a little bit more purpose built stuff, right? Like they're fine seeing something built that only they can use. Makes sense in the Navy's case because you're talking maritime. A lot of land applications aren't going to work at sea and vice versa. Same with air to some regard. But no, I do. I think it's going to be pretty promising. I think there's a lot of bipartisan support from what we're hearing and seeing, and I think it's only going to continue to grow and really pull in more of these. These really smart founders are building really great technology, right? And the more that we can, as a nation, can invest in those existing technologies, build the small business industrial base, the better the country is, right? We're creating jobs and giving people, careers, livelihoods.
Yeah, makes sense. Yeah, and from the kind of as general public, like what are some of the things that you would like to see being done differently that can help improve that adoption? Is it adoption rate, like the 1%?
Yeah.
Like what can the company itself do? Like should that will help improve that? Like is it they should start doing more of FedRAMP or prepare their product in a specific way? Or are there any other recommendations that you have for any company that might be listening to this saying, hey, maybe in future I want to enter this space, but let me keep my product ready for it?
Yeah, no, I mean, I think it's understanding. It's really about understanding what the government customer you're going to work with wants and needs. Understand in their program office who is actually going to fund this, because it's probably not the person you're working with. You're
Right.
probably working with the person who's going to use what you built, but
Hmm.
they're not authorized to buy what you built. And
Yeah.
so I think it really is the companies having those conversations early, which are, hey, this is the solution we're building towards. And second, I'm on contract, I am building the solution, we're completing the milestones, but I'm also engaging with others within that organization to start having those conversations about, hey, this thing's going to transition in the next 12 to 18 months.
Hmm.
Let's not wait until we're 1 month out from the finish of the project to go start requesting budget. Let's
Hmm.
start that process now with the thought that we are going to hit these milestones and complete these objectives. That
Hmm.
way, once we do that, we're actually able to transition it faster.
Okay.
The other thing that we do is, and we've had a lot of success, and I think, again, there's bipartisan support on the Hill for this because they want to see transition.
Hmm.
There was a recent report put out about DIU, GAO report, I believe, and Defense Innovation Unit, and they're doing a lot of great work. But the only area they got dinged on was transition, right? And so I think that as you see government wanting DIU to double down, you want more transition, appropriations certainly become a path for that, right? So the government has to follow their budget request process. They
Hmm.
can't go lobby for money, obviously, right? But we as commercial industry can, and we have seen good interest, good support to fund these companies through appropriations to keep that technology going while that program office goes and procures that long-term budget that they're going to use to sustain it. And so there, I think it's just navigating those different paths of engaging early with the stakeholders that you're working with, getting the right people in the room that actually hold the purse strings so that they're aware that this project is happening. They
Hmm.
know that there's going to be a request for money. They're not
Hmm.
surprised when the request comes, hey, I need $1 million in 30 days. And then ultimately leveraging folks on the Hill to actually get money pushed through the Pentagon, pushed back down to procure those solutions. And so far over the past couple of years that we've been really focusing on all these transition paths, we've seen great success for companies doing that. And that's one of the things we help them with, right, is get those appropriation fundings. And they can actually also be matched with that funds matching program I mentioned that is VC fund matching program. It matches VC dollars or government dollars. So it creates some unique pathways there. And I think that's part of why they tend to get funded, right? Is the appropriators understand that that's a lot of what's happening, is that, they're going to give, if I give you $1 million and then you get $1 million in additional SBIR funding, now that's a $2 million effort, right? And so the government is getting a lot of value out of their $1 million investment because now it's doubling, right?
Yeah.
And that's earmarked money already. It's money that's already set aside. So I think that's going to be really the path, right? Is just continuing to work on transition, engage early, and really work all angles that you can to get it put on permanent contract.
Okay, makes sense. Yeah, thanks for sharing that, and everyone listening. Prepare. I think that was a very valuable piece of advice. And yes, you're working with someone who's giving you the requirements for while you're in the R&D phase, but think long term, have a longer term plan so that it's more effective. Yeah, that sounds great. So we are almost at the end of this recording, but before we conclude, I wanted to open up the floor and are there any final words that you would like to share with the audience?
Well, first off, I really appreciate you having me on today. It's fun to talk to you and to learn more about you as well. Yeah, I mean, I think, it's one of those things that, if you're a small business, and let me say too, small business is the definition of this program. It's 500 employees or less, 51% US owned companies. And that's basically the requirement, right? Revenue doesn't matter. There's not the NICS codes and other things you run into in traditional government contracting. But if you're a startup and you're building novel technology, it is a program you absolutely have to look at. I mean, where else can you go as a startup and get non-dilutive funding? That's just, you're going to give up equity. And so the other nice thing about it is they don't want you to completely change your business model to do business with them. They still want you to build that commercial solution just like you're building it. They just need to make sure that it's got the features to help map to their requirements. And so it's not that I have to go and have two different completely separate pipelines running my application, one for government, one for commercial. And so the idea is it's low overhead to the companies. It's a great enablement opportunity. And we're always looking for more novel technology, right? I think robotics is a big space of interest right now. We see obviously AI, but I think when you think AI, not necessarily Gen and AI LLMs, I think that's kind of, they've got that part kind of figured out. We're looking at more agentic AI, other things like that. But I think there's just a huge opportunity, and I just really implore small businesses, take a look at it, take a look at the program, and reach out to me if you have any questions. I'm always happy to help. I mean, ultimately, our mission is to get innovative technology into the hands of the warfighter. And however I can do that, I want to be part of that ecosystem.
Yeah, and what's a starting point? Where does somebody start? Whom do they go to a website?
Yeah, you could go to the Small Business Administration SBIR website. That's a good resource for all SBIRs across the federal government. When you think military specifically, AFWERX, AFWERX.com. AFWERX.com is the website that the Air Force and Space Force have all of their information about their program. And then there's also the DoD's site that has all of the, across Army, Navy, Air Force, everyone has their topics and everything listed there. It's DoD, SBIR, STTR.mil. And those would be some great resources. Go to the SBA's website, look at AFWERX, look at DoD, SBIRCitter.mil. And that starts to give you an idea of, one, what is the program? Two, what opportunities exist out there, right? And is this something that would be of interest to my company to submit against one of the specific topics where they're asking for something, or one of the open topics where, again, anyone can go find a government stakeholder that says, yes, I want that. I want your capability, willing to work with you, can submit a proposal to get funded.
Okay, makes sense. Yeah, thanks. Thanks for sharing a lot of resources on how to go ahead contribute back. Before we conclude, going back a little bit on the personal level, what are some of your hobbies? What do you like to do?
Sure. Yeah. So actually, I really enjoy health and fitness related activities. I like to do that with my kids as much as possible. My oldest, him and I spent 5 years getting black belts. And then once we got those, I guess it was 2 years ago now, we started going to the gym together. And so going to the gym with my oldest, I do like a little golf when I can break away from the family. That's definitely something fun. Not that I'm very good at it anymore because I don't get to play very much, but I still like going out there and doing that. And then just hanging out at the house, hanging out with the family when I'm in town, not traveling for work. And I'm also a big barbecue guy. I do quite a bit of barbecue cooking and even a little light catering for some friends on occasion if they're having events or get-togethers. So that's usually what I'm gonna do. So guarantee this weekend the barbecue pit will be running Saturday and Sunday.
Oh, perfect. Nice. Yeah, I know today being the Good Friday, I think it's a great start to the nice weekend.
Yes,
Yeah.
absolutely.
Sounds great. I would love to enjoy some of the food that you make, and even I like golfing, but that brings up a great point. I think I still have like young kids, but I think once they grow up, I might be able to like incorporate some of that and like create a more fun activities together. So thanks for sharing that.
Sure.
Thanks a lot for coming on our show today. It was extremely valuable, and I really appreciate it. Thanks.
I appreciate you having me.
Thanks.
That's a wrap on today's episode of Main Street Minds. Want to share your journey with our audience? Head over to mainstreetmindspodcast.com/guest to apply.